we're bringing you a little bit of a blast from the past, back to that time when we decided to build an LED billboard.
Next to the highway, so we apologize if it's noisy in this audio clip here. But anyways, yeah, so right after we moved into the building, we decided that we wanted to get a little bit more visibility for the business. So we threw up a billboard here and then one down by the other end of the property. And yeah, so we at the time did a lot of videoing, didn't have time to edit it together to show you actually what goes into it. So we're finally getting around to editing it up, and spoiler alert, it's a lot of concrete and a lot of steel.
And a lot of really big hardware.
And a lot of big hardware. So anyways, check it out. All right, so we didn't actually capture the design stuff on camera, and I wish we would have, but basically after we got city approval, the next step was I drew it up as a 3D model in ANSYS Space Claim with that we could send over to the engineers for them to do all of their analysis and calculations and come back with the final design. The upper billboard was pretty simple. That ended up just basically being a big steel tube and then a piece of square steel tubing welded through it or on top of it. That one turned out cool. We originally, for the lower one, you'll notice had individual sonotubes poured for the footings for each one of these. And Beth didn't like that so much.
We decided it would be a little inefficient and harder to lay it all out.
And I think you were right in the end. I think getting those sonotubes perfectly straight, setting on the footing, and making them work would have been really difficult. So we ended up turning these into a stem wall and formed up a footing, set the stem wall on top, and then it was basically just one continuous piece of concrete, which made it really easy to install the sign on. So yeah, that's the design.
Once we got all of that structurally approved, we started construction. So once we got the city approval, the sign permit completed, finished the design and got the engineering back, and then completed the survey for where both of the billboards would sit on the property, it was time to start excavating. So we brought in the biggest backhoe we could find with rubber tracks in hopes that we would minimize the damage to the parking lot and the landscaping. As you can see, that obviously didn't work so well, but it did do a really great job of digging the really big holes that we needed to dig for the foundation of the billboards.
Yeah, and then from there, we went ahead and formed up the footing. So this is the lower sign you're looking at down here. Basically, I think those were 2x8s or 2x10s, and just laid out the rebar in the pattern that the engineer had for us for the footings. After that, we started the concrete pour up at the billboard sign by the freeway. You can see the forms. There wasn't a lot of form work for that one above grade. We just brought it up about, I think, 2.5 feet or so just to look pretty. You can see the rebar cage that we made here, and basically the engineer came up with a cylindrical rebar pattern with a bunch of extensions coming off of it of varying sizes and lengths and angles for us to tie it into the rest of that slab there. I think this ended up being almost 40 yards of concrete. Here the electrician is tying in the grounding. Basically we attached that to the rebar cage. They're finishing vibrating in here at the top. Screening off this form. And then the next day we went ahead and poured the lower sign. So you can see down here, the lower sign didn't end up being too big of a pour at all. I think that was maybe what, like...
probably about 5 yards or so. It was a pretty basic kind of slab pour.
Yeah, it went really fast too. The only hiccup on this one was that the electrician was running a little bit behind schedule, but we kind of bulkheaded off that corner where he was going to tie in his ground, and just kept working on the rest of the slabs while we were waiting for the electrician to show up.
We had to break this one into 2 slabs because we did have a drainage culvert that sort of ran between the two where we needed to put the sign. So that's kind of why you're seeing 2 separate slabs broken apart.
Yeah, we were a little bit worried about that heaving, so we basically set the footings on both sides of it, bridged them together, and left a couple of feet between the top of that cauldron and the footing just in case it were to heave or move from the moisture at any point in time. Here you can see the electrician showed up, and now he's getting the grounding set up on the rebar there. Once he got there, he only had maybe 3 minutes of work. It was pretty fast. But we're glad that he was able to get out and get it in quick before we finished pouring.
So now that he's got that fastened down, we were able to finish pouring the concrete.
Yeah, this little one filled in pretty fast. After we got everything screeded in, we just bull floated over it nice. Wanted to get everything nice and flat and smooth because we were going to set up our forms on here for the stem walls coming up that the sign attaches to. So we made sure to get that all level, perfect, and nicely floated. And then obviously we didn't bother to extrude or anything. So just left it like that and left her to cure. You'll notice a couple of shims we had to put in on the side there. The concrete weight pushed out on our forms in a couple spots where it didn't anchor quite as nice as we needed to. So we ended up having to shove a couple of wedges in there to prevent the forms from bowing out. But obviously it's just footings, so didn't make too big of a difference.
Yeah, ultimately this whole footing system got covered up with dirt and landscaping and never to be seen again.
Yeah, so next step was we wanted to make sure that we were putting the stem walls that the sign mounted to in the right location, obviously. So we brought the surveyors back out and then had them go ahead and pound stakes where the sign limits were. So we knew that those were basically the required setbacks from the road, and we weren't allowed to put the sign any closer to the road than the limit stakes that he put in for us.
So then we had to bring in some pretty heavy equipment to bore the electricity from the building to the signs. Do you remember exactly how far that was? It was a pretty good distance.
Yeah, I think the one sign was 1,600 feet of cable, and I think the other one was 750 feet of cable. So there was a lot of wire that went in. Basically, we horizontally bored it in. We had them pull back 2 pieces of conduit, you'll notice here. These horizontal boring machines just amaze me that there's a guy sitting 1,000 feet away, and you can see those little white dots. They're just keeping an eye on where everything is. And the guy with the sounder is basically toning out where the head location is. And within a couple feet of the hole here, you'll see they basically just punch up. There it is.
It is pretty amazing technology that they can do that. Just shove that right through the ground.
I don't understand how they steer either. Like he'll tell me he needs to go a little left or a little right. Here's the 2 pieces of pipe that we pulled through. So we pulled through a big piece of conduit for the electric, and then we pulled through a piece of orange conduit for the fiber optics that was going to go down there as well.
And that was going to be important because we really wanted to be able to control the signs from the building, not have to be at the sign to change what the sign showed at any given time.
Exactly.
All right, so here we're making some templates for the bolt patterns for the signs. So it's really important that the threaded rod that comes out of the slab foundation lines up perfectly with the bolt patterns on the mounting flanges for the signs. So we designed some templates. They have some nice center lines, so we can use those to align it properly and then make sure our bolt patterns end up in the perfect placement.
So Beth just held up our sample template, and now this is cutting the final templates that we used for the bolt patterns. So obviously when you've got these stem wall forms and you want to make sure that your bolt patterns are perfectly placed because they have to match all of the LED modules, we needed to make sure that we could get those in the right spot. So we came up with the idea of basically cutting plywood templates that we screwed to the top of the stem wall forms. And then we laser etched center lines on here. So as long as we could set a string line from one end of the form to the other, and then line that string line up with the center lines on each of these templates, we were basically able to know that our bolt pattern would be in the perfect location. These ones were a lot easier to do because they were just J-bolts that we put in. Yeah, this just worked out like $1 million. It was just an awesome solution.
And as a bonus, when you're cutting plywood on a laser or etching it, it smells like a bonfire.
It does. Everyone in the building wants to go grab marshmallows or something. It's always so fun when you're doing that. So you can see the holes for the bolts, and then you can see the laser center lines that we're putting in there. So we marked which ones were center lines and which ones were edge lines as well. So basically you can see the 2 center lines. As long as our string line lined up with those, we were in good shape. And then we just punched out, obviously, the circles. And there's our finished template. So I think we ended up with 14 or 16 of those, but it just made the job so easy.
Yep.
So then once we were done with that, the next step was forming up the forms for these stem walls that we were going to attach the billboard to, the lower sign billboard to. So here you can see we're just using 2x6 and CDX plywood. We put down one row first, and then from there, we basically were able to kind of adjust the walls coming up from there wherever we wanted. We pre-built those in the building as well, so we didn't have to do them down in the ditch. This worked out super slick, just really worked out well, and pretty easy to assemble, kind of pre-modular from the building, ready to go. So here you can see these are the outside walls, and then we just basically built an extension on the inside in order to form them out. So this is the first step. And then now you can see we added the inside part. We put our bolt templates on there, and we drilled, pinned our rebar into the footing, and then brought our rebar up and attached it here. You can see everything was lined up perfect. Then once that was done, the next step was
pouring more concrete. So we used, there's kind of a theme here. We used an awful lot of concrete for this project. But here they're just pouring and vibrating in the concrete for those stem walls.
Yeah, I think the key is, anytime you're using concrete from a structural perspective, you want to minimize the moisture in it. The more water you add to it, the less strength. But in order to make sure that it fills all the voids and you don't get air bubbles or air pockets, the vibrating just makes it's just so important for it.
So here they are, all poured and finished and curing out. Now they're going to start removing those forms off once the concrete's cured, and that's kind of the first step into getting ready to set the signs.
Yeah, this side came off pretty easy. They were able to pry it out. The other side didn't want to come off, so I would be lying if I said we didn't grab the thumb on that hoe and pluck it out of there with the excavator. It worked out pretty good. It just wouldn't come out of that corner there, so I think we just barely got it out of square. Next step was we got ready to pull our wires. So here they're getting set up. These things are just amazing, by the way. Every time I've done it, we've pulled the ropes by hand, and it's just so much work. Here they're lubing up the wires that are going through. They got the rope connected to it. They got the rope through to their puller machine. I don't know what that's called. What is that?
I have no idea.
The guys were calling it a mule. I don't know if that's like the official name for it or... Here you can see the wires that we're bringing in. It's 3-phase, 480 volt. So we've got 3 wires and a ground coming through. And this was a big project. I think there was...
4 or 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5 electricians working on pulling that through. But guys did a great job getting it in. So here's coming up from the underground. Here's when we were pulling to the lower sign. So they put their panel in first and then connected their conduit, and then we just pulled the wire right up into the sign, or right up into the panel. So much easier than pulling.
It is pretty efficient. And there's the wires coming through.
So then once we got that done, the next step was to start welding away. So the engineer designed the exact structural materials that he wanted to use, the structural tube, and the big piece of pipe. And so then the welders came out, welded them up. Once they got it welded, we had the painters out. They primed everything and then put a couple really good coats of paint on. Obviously, we want this to last for a long time.
Yeah, and hopefully be pretty low maintenance. So it was important to get really good coat of paint on there to protect it. It is a massive post.
Yeah. We didn't catch sandblasting. All the dust you see there is from the sandblasting process. Once the electricians started working on wiring it, the guys had some work to do, so we needed to flip it over. So we brought a crane out and basically lifted her up, swung her over, and then set her back down so the guys could start drilling and measuring and fabricating on the other side of it. And so the painter could do the bottom of it as well. I think there was a total of 4 or 5 crane lifts for this particular project. And those cranes are expensive.
They are, and heavy. They did a little bit of a number on the parking lot, but...
Yeah, the cranes did really beat the parking lot up. We learned a lot about cranes during the project as well. I guess I thought like a crane's lifting capacity was all that mattered. And we quickly learned that the further away from the crane you want to go, the bigger crane you need. So these little cranes worked pretty well for helping kind of move the sign closer into position near the big sign. Here you can see now that everything has been fabbed and painted. Now they're fabricating the detachable frame that all of the LED modules will attach to. So that needed to get fabricated, welded, and then that had to get basically bolt holes drilled in it to set the locations for all the bolts that are going to attach that. The tools that these welders have are pretty impressive. Like, they have some impressive clamps.
It is impressive, and also very precision for just like how large the structure was.
Yeah. The magnetic drills, those were pretty cool. I was impressed with those. The sign got a little bit scratched up during the crane lifts, but not too bad. While they're working on fabricating those frames, the electrician was getting all of his wires pulled in and getting everything set to go. They did a lot of work on the ground, which made it really easy.
Way easier doing it on the ground than way up in the air.
Here they are welding up the rest of that frame. We actually made a little mistake, and we ended up with the back frame essentially blocking opening of some of the cabinet doors for the sign modules. So we ended up having to do some kind of redesign on the fly. Then once that was done, they brought out a massive crane. I think this is like about a 150-ton crane, and basically needed that size because we had to do such a far reach up the hill. So the guys came out. The guys from Rocket Crane did this. They were just amazing. Amazing job just figuring out how to get that thing lifted, get it swung into position. And you'll see here in a second, just first go, they set it down right on the bolts. It was unbelievable.
And as luck would have it, it was raining and really nice weather that day.
It was
windy, rainy, not pleasant.
No, they were really eager to get it to go down on its pattern or down on its bolt pattern and get out of there. They were not super excited about having their expensive crane up in the storm.
And at this moment, we were awfully glad we had those templates that had the hardware lined up perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. It was the first try that you saw, and it went right down on the bolt patterns. Everything was perfect. You could not have asked for a better situation. We had a little mistake here. We didn't have any way to remove the straps, so we had to scramble at the last minute and grab a scissor lift or grab a boom lift, get the lift all the way over and get it going. But we did get the straps off and good to go. You can see here they finished the retaining walls and got all that good to go. Here we're testing on the inside of the building. This was when we were putting the sign together to make sure everything worked right and everything was going to light up the way we wanted to. So we took some pallet racking, basically strapped the sign to the pallet racking, and put all the modules up, and then tested them just to make sure everything was working the way that it was supposed to work.
It was a pretty cool moment once we got that whole thing assembled and then turned it on. I think everybody was pretty excited.
Yeah, I think that was pretty exciting when we flipped the switch and it worked.
And I also don't think that we realized the scale of it until we got it all assembled like that.
Yeah, when you set it up inside, it was like, wow.
Yeah.
So now we're back down at the lower sign, and the guys with the cranes set these posts in, so they're all good to go. Now all they needed to do was mount the bottoms. So this basically just had the address of the building on it and some random
informational signage.
Yeah. This is fixed signage, obviously. There's no LEDs associated with this one. So the guys basically string-lined it, marked it, drilled the holes for it, and then these bottom portions attached to the sign posts. And then from there, they went ahead and used that to measure the location for all of the... Oh, no, here they're still drilling. I'm sorry. Now they measured it. Now they're drilling the locations for the sign cabinets or the mods that go above it. So they got the first one set there, and then all of them spaced out from there. They obviously sit on the bottom sign. The bottom is back about a 1/4 inch because there's a 1/4 inch piece of aluminum face that has the signage on the bottom that goes there. So once that sign goes on, then it's all nice and plumb. Once they were done with that, we just got all our cables routed in there, and we wanted everything to be really easy to access from a service perspective. So we put quite a bit of attention to detail into making sure that we had boxes at each of the locations where we could whip into and that everything was connected nice and looked good.
And there it is, the beautiful sign down by the entryway to the building.
Yeah, and then here we are throwing in place the first of the framing support modules. So the bottom one there is the City of White Bear Township sign at the bottom of ours. And you can see it's ready to go at this point. So the last crane pick was lifting up the frame with all of the LED modules attached to it. This one was
quite a job.
A sail, basically a sail.
You can see in the trees kind of how windy it was that day. But that was the day we had lined up to get enough people there and enough equipment there to get those up. So we went with it. It was a little sketchy for a little bit.
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, but the guys got her done. The guys from A and B were the ones that did this project, or did the last pick, and they did just an amazing job as well.
So here we're just showing the splicing of the fiber optic cables, correct?
Yep. So
to make those final connections for the signs to be able to control them.
Yeah, so basically we just needed to terminate the fiber. So essentially the fiber has it's glass, and so this little fusion splice machine, I'd never seen anything like it. Pretty cool, but basically you can see there on the screen it's lining up the two pieces of glass, and then once you get it in alignment, you hit the OK button and it splices it together and comes out with the termination on. It was just so cool. So there you can see that's arcing or fusing, and boom, you can inspect your splice and test it.
Pretty neat.
Really cool. And we ended up having to use fiber. We wanted to do Ethernet if we could, but the distances made fiber just the only option for making it work. And then there you can go. There you can see the termination on it.
So there we are, turning on the main power to the signs, doing our first test run, and yeah, they looked awesome. They, I think, blew us all away, but it was a pretty cool outcome, I think.
Yeah, it turned out just amazing. Obviously, it's on 35E, which is a really high traffic freeway in the Twin Cities, and it just turned out great. So we're really happy with how the project came together. You can see in the background there some of the patching in the parking lot.
I did mention we did a little damage to the parking lot.
Yeah, there was a lot.
But it was all worth it. And once it was all in and up and operating,
did look amazing.
Awesome project.
And great visibility for the business. So there you go. That was the time we built an LED billboard.